In the village of where the soil was so hard that even the earthworms wore helmets, lived two brothers, Obi and Chidi. Now, if poverty was a corporate organization, Obi and Chidi were the chairman and the secretary. These two were so broke that if they walked past the bank, the ATM would start coughing. Obi, the elder brother, was a man who believed that hard work was a disease and sleep was the cure. He spent his days sitting in front of their mud house, analyzing the movement of clouds and waiting for a miracle that did not have his address. He was the kind of person who would pray for a job, but if God sent an interview letter, he would ask God to provide transport money first. Chidi, the younger one, was hardworking but unlucky. If Chidi started a business selling ice block, rain would fall for 3 months straight. If he decided to sell firewood, the sun would become so hot that nobody needed fire to cook. It was as if his village people were using his destiny to play Ludo, and they were winning. They lived in a house that was barely standing. The roof leaked so much that when it rained outside, it rained inside too, sometimes even heavier inside. And in the middle of their dry, dusty backyard stood a tree. It was an ugly tree. It had no leaves, only twisted, black branches that looked like the gnarled fingers of a wicked witch. The bark was rough and gray, like the skin of a crocodile that died of thirst. Birds refused to perch on it. Lizards ran past it with speed. Even the wind seemed to go silent when it blew through the branches. The brothers had tried to cut it down many times to use as firewood, but the wood was as hard as iron. Every axe they used broke. Every machete they used bent. So they left it there, a useless monument in their compound of suffering. One particularly hot afternoon, the hunger in the house was tangible. It was the kind of hunger that makes you see double. Obi was lying on a mat, staring at the ceiling, while Chidi was pacing up and down, angry at the world. "Brother," Chidi said, his voice sharp with frustration, "we have eaten nothing but roasted air and hope for 2 days. Are you going to just lie there until we turn to dust?" Obi yawned, scratching his belly. "Chidi, calm down. Panic burns calories. I am conserving energy. Besides, I had a dream that wealth is coming." "Wealth?" Chidi shouted. "Unless wealth is walking on its own legs to knock on this door, we are finished. You borrowed money from Mom and Kechi to play betting, and you lost. Now we can't even buy gari to drink." The mention of the lost money sparked a fire. The brothers began to argue. Words turned into insults. Insults turned into shouting. And because a hungry man is an angry man, shouting turned into shoving. They wrestled into the backyard, right near the ugly black tree. Chidi, fueled by years of resentment, swung a fist and caught Obi on the jaw. Pow! Blood sprayed from Obi's lip. Obi, shocked and enraged, grabbed a sharp stone from the ground and threw it. It missed Chidi's head but grazed his arm, opening a deep cut. Blood-thick red brother's blood splashed onto the exposed roots of the ugly tree. Suddenly, the ground shook. The brothers froze, panting, their anger momentarily replaced by confusion. A deep groaning sound came from the tree, like an old door being forced open after 100 years. "Did you hear that?" Obi whispered, holding his bleeding lip. "It's the tree," Chidi stammered, backing away. "It's crying." But it wasn't crying tears. Where the drops of their blood had soaked into the dry roots, the bark of the tree began to crack open. A thick golden liquid started to ooze out. It moved slowly, like honey, catching the afternoon sun. It wasn't sap. It wasn't water, it was pure liquid gold. It dripped from the trunk and pooled on the dusty ground, instantly hardening into solid, glittering nuggets. The brothers stared. The silence in the compound was heavy. Obi forgot the pain in his lip. Chidi forgot the hunger in his stomach. Slowly, Obi crawled forward. He reached out a trembling hand and touched the golden puddle. It was cold. It was heavy. He picked up a nugget the size of a chicken egg. He bit it. His eyes widened until they looked like saucers. CHIDI ... double quotes. Obi's voice was shaking. "It's gold." "It's real gold." Chidi looked at his bleeding arm, then at the tree. He looked at the blood on the roots, then at the gold on the ground. The realization hit them both at the same time. It drank the blood, Chidi whispered. And it paid us. Obi looked at Chidi. A strange look crossed his face, a look of greed mixed with madness. He wiped the blood from his lip and flicked it onto the tree trunk. Hiss. The tree groaned again. Another crack appeared. More gold oozed out. It works, Obi laughed, a sound that was not entirely joyful. Brother, we are rich. We are rich. But Chidi was looking at the cut on his arm. It was throbbing. Brother, this is evil. A tree that eats blood? This is juju. We should run. Run to where? Obi snapped, grabbing the gold nuggets and stuffing them into his ragged pocket. Run back to hunger? Run back to begging Mom and Ketchy for credit? God has answered our prayers. He just used a different method. Don't be foolish, Chidi. This is our harvest. That night, they didn't sleep. They went to the city nearby and sold the first nugget. The goldsmith looked at them with suspicion, but the quality was pure 24 carats, flawless. They returned to the village with bags of rice, fresh meat, new clothes, and pockets full of cash. They ate like kings. But as they ate, they both looked at the backyard. They knew the money would finish. And when it did, the tree would be waiting. Within a month, the brothers' lives had completely turned upside down. They renovated their dilapidated house, adding a shiny zinc roof that gleamed so brightly it practically blinded the neighbors when the sun hit it just right. They bought a generator, and its constant loud hum became the new soundtrack of the village, a noisy announcement of their newfound wealth. They started wearing expensive lace materials, the fabric so stiff and starched that they walked like robots, their movements rigid and unnatural. The village of Umuez was buzzing with confusion and speculation. The local gossips, of course, went into overdrive immediately. Mama Nkechi, the woman who sold pepper at the market but whose real specialty was spreading rumors, held court with her customers. "Ah!" she'd exclaim, her voice full of dramatic flair. "Is it not Obi and Chidi? The same boys who used to climb my fence to steal mangoes? I saw them with my own 2 eyes carrying a flat-screen TV that's wider than my entire shop. They must have joined a cult. Or maybe they're doing that Yahoo Plus nonsense." As word of their fortune spread, people started flocking to their house. Relatives they hadn't seen or heard from in a decade suddenly appeared at their doorstep, their faces plastered with wide, insincere smiles. "Cousin Obi! Uncle Chidi! We were just passing by and thought we'd come and greet you," they'd say, their eyes scanning the new property with envy. But the brothers were cautious. They kept the backyard, where the mysterious tree stood, completely locked down. They built high fences topped with barbed wire and installed a heavy iron gate. Nobody, not even their closest supposed relatives, was allowed anywhere near the tree. But there was a huge problem brewing beneath the surface of their lavish lifestyle. The money was flowing out as quickly as it came in. There were extravagant parties, expensive cars, and a constant stream of women who were more interested in their wallets than their well-being. The gold, however, had a steep price. It only appeared when they bled. At first, the cost seemed manageable, almost like a fair trade, a simple pinprick on a fingertip. A small, shallow cut with a razor blade. They would stand by the ancient tree, slice a thumb, and let a few drops of their blood soak into the dark soil at its base. In return, they'd collect a small nugget of pure gold. It was a little pain for a whole lot of pleasure. But the tree, they soon discovered, was greedy. Its appetite was growing. One evening, Obi stood by the tree and pricked his finger, letting the blood drip onto the roots as usual. But this time, the tree remained silent. It didn't groan. No shimmering gold appeared from its bark. "What is wrong with this thing?" Obi muttered in frustration, squeezing his finger harder to produce more blood. Chidi stood nearby, holding an empty sack, his face etched with worry. "Maybe it's tired?" he suggested meekly. "Trees don't get tired," Obi growled, his patience wearing thin. He grabbed a kitchen knife from his pocket and made a deeper slash across his palm. Blood flowed freely now, staining his hand and dripping onto the ground. Still, nothing happened. The tree stood silent and imposing, its black branches looking like skeletal fingers mocking them in the twilight. It wants more, Chidi said softly, his voice barely a whisper. Don't you see, brother? The price has gone up. A little finger prick isn't enough to pay for a Mercedes-Benz. Obi's eyes darted from Chidi to the knife in his hand. A desperate, wild look crossed his face. Then, without any warning, he lunged at his brother. Give me your arm, he yelled. No! Chidi shouted, scrambling backward to dodge him. The two of them tumbled to the ground, and a brutal fight erupted. This was no longer brotherly roughhousing. It was a desperate, violent struggle. They rolled in the dirt, punching, kicking, and even biting each other like wild animals. Obi smashed Chidi's nose, and Chidi retaliated by biting Obi's ear. Blood splattered everywhere on the dusty ground, on their expensive lace clothes, and most importantly, all over the gnarled roots of the tree. Suddenly, a deep, guttural groan echoed through the yard, louder and more powerful than ever before. The ground beneath them vibrated intensely. And then, from the trunk of the tree, a waterfall of gold gushed out. This wasn't just small nuggets anymore. These were solid bars of gold. Thick, heavy, gleaming bars. The fight stopped instantly. The brothers lay on the ground, bleeding, bruised, and panting, but their faces were stretched into grotesque smiles. They crawled toward the pile of gold, hugging the bars to their chests, their own blood smearing the precious metal. Look at it, Obi wheezed, spitting out a broken tooth. We're billionaires, Chidi. We just have to fight a little. Yes, Chidi agreed, wiping a smear of blood from his eyes. Just a little pain, for a lot of gain. From that day on, their dynamic shifted permanently. They were no longer brothers. They were business partners in a twisted torture factory, and the raw material was their own flesh and blood. Their house became a palace on the outside, but inside, they looked like the battered victims of a brutal war. They started wearing long-sleeve shirts and dark sunglasses, even indoors, to hide the constant array of bruises, cuts, and scars that covered their bodies. They walked with pronounced limps and flinched at the slightest touch. When curious villagers asked, "Ah, Obi, what happened? Why is your eye so swollen?" he would offer a lame excuse. I fell down the stairs, or I accidentally walked into a door. But the villagers weren't stupid. They saw the deep-seated fear in the brothers' eyes. They noticed how they recoiled from any physical contact. Inside the high walls of their compound, it was a horror show. They had a schedule. Tuesday was punching day. Friday was knife day. They developed a morbid system for their self-inflicted violence. Hit me here, Obi would say, pointing to his ribs. Don't break the bone, just make sure you break the skin. The tree likes the blood to flow fresh. Okay, Chidi would negotiate, his voice strained. But after that, you have to cut my shoulder. I need the money to buy that new plot of land in the capital. They became addicted to the pain, because pain meant profit. The sickening sound of a breaking nose was no longer a tragedy. It was the sweet sound of a bank deposit alert. They stopped caring about each other's health or well-being. All that mattered was the gold. But the tree, that wicked ancient entity, was insatiable. Its demands grew more and more extreme. It required more violence, more blood, more pain for less and less gold in return. The exchange rate was crashing, and they were the ones paying the price. One dark and rainy night, the brothers sat in their lavish living room, plunged into darkness by a power outage. They didn't care, they were broke again. They had gambled, squandered, and spent every last bit of their fortune. The creditors were calling relentlessly, and the ominous quit notice from life itself felt like it was being nailed to their front door. We need a big one, Obi said, his voice a raspy whisper. He looked 20 years older than his actual age, his skin a roadmap of scars and old wounds. Chidi sat huddled in a chair, shaking uncontrollably. He had lost so much blood over the past few months that he was perpetually cold and weak. Brother, I can't, he whimpered. I don't think I have enough blood left. We don't need small cuts, Obi insisted, his eyes gleaming with a dangerous, fanatical light in the dim candlelight. We need a massive harvest, one that will set us up for life. We'll sell all the gold, put the money in foreign bank accounts, and never touch that cursed tree again. Just one last time. What do you mean, one last time? Chidi asked, his voice trembling with fear. Obi reached under the sofa and pulled out a long, heavy machete. It was freshly sharpened, and its edge glinted menacingly in the flickering light. We need a serious wound, Obi said, his voice dropping to a low, chilling tone. A real sacrifice. In a small village, tucked away from the prying eyes of the world, lived two brothers, Obi and Chidi. They had a secret, a dark and glittering one, hidden in their own backyard. It was a tree, a strange and ancient thing, that bled gold whenever they bled for it. Each cut, each bruise they inflicted upon one another, would coax shimmering coins from its bark. But their greed, like a relentless hunger, was never satisfied. They wanted more, not just coins, but a river of gold. One night, as the rain fell in cold, heavy sheets, they stood before the tree. It loomed over them, a black silhouette against the stormy sky, its branches like skeletal fingers reaching for them. Who goes first? Chidi asked, his voice a tremble in the wind. We do it together, Obi declared, his eyes hard. We fight. For real. No holding back. The more blood, the more gold. They began to circle each other, not as brothers, but as gladiators in a muddy arena. The bond that had once tied them together, the shared memories of a childhood spent in poverty and love, had dissolved. All that remained was the cold, sharp edge of greed. Obi was the first to strike, swinging a heavy machete. Chidi narrowly dodged, countering with a thick iron rod. The clang of metal on metal echoed through the night, a harsh song of their betrayal. This wasn't just a fight for gold anymore. It was a violent eruption of years of unspoken resentment. Obi, the older brother, had always seen Chidi as weak, a burden. Chidi had always chafed under Obi's domineering nature. Now every blow was a release, every slash a confession of their hidden hatred. The machete sliced through flesh. The iron rod smashed against bone. Their blood flowed freely, mixing with the rain and mud, seeping into the roots of the hungry tree. Suddenly, the tree began to shake violently. The ground beneath their feet cracked open, and from the fissure, a torrent of gold erupted. It wasn't coins this time. It was a molten river, a cascade of unbelievable wealth. Look, Obi screamed, clutching a deep gash in his side. Look at it! We are kings! But Chidi wasn't looking at the gold. His eyes, wild with rage and pain, were fixed only on his brother. He was beyond reason, consumed by a blinding fury. With a final desperate roar, he swung the iron rod with all his might, bringing it down on the back of Obi's head. The sound was sickening, a dull crack that was swallowed by the storm. Obi crumpled, falling face down into the mud, and did not move again. Chidi stood panting over his brother's still form. Blood poured from a wound on his own chest where the machete had caught him. He let the iron rod drop from his hand and collapsed to his knees. Obi? He whispered, his voice hoarse. Obi, wake up. The gold is here. We are finished. But there was no reply. With his last ounce of strength, Chidi began to crawl towards the massive pile of gold. It was more than they had ever dreamed of, enough to buy the whole country. He reached out a trembling hand, his vision blurring at the edges. The world spun around him, and the cold rain felt like shards of ice on his skin. I won, he mumbled, a faint gurgling sound. I am ... rich. Then darkness claimed him. He fell beside his brother, their blood mingling in the soil. A final, tragic union. The next morning, the sun broke through the clouds. The birds began to sing again. But an eerie silence hung over the brothers' compound. A neighbor, Mazi Okik, had been kept awake all night by the sounds of fighting. Fearing the worst, he finally gathered the courage to climb the fence, bringing the police with him. I told you, he shouted as they scrambled over the wall. They were doing rituals. I heard them killing themselves. They dropped into the backyard and froze, gasping at the scene before them. There lay Obi and Chidi, side by side, their bodies covered in gruesome wounds, the ground stained deep red with their blood. But it was the tree that was most confusing. The brothers were lying on a massive pile of red dust. Where is the money? The police sergeant asked, scanning the area. You said they were rich. They were. Maziokik insisted, his voice frantic. They had gold. I saw it with my own eyes. But there was no gold to be found. Only the crimson dust that clung to the brothers' lifeless bodies. You see, the tree was a spirit, a trap. It didn't truly give gold. It merely borrowed it, creating an illusion of wealth to feed on the greed and pain of men. The gold existed only as long as the brothers were alive to suffer for it. The moment their hearts stopped beating, the moment their contract of pain was fulfilled, the illusion vanished. The gold reverted to its true form, worthless red dust. The tree itself stood tall and proud. Its branches, once bare and skeletal, were now covered in beautiful, lush green leaves. It looked healthy. It looked fed. It had drunk the lives of 2 brothers and bloomed in magnificent return. The villagers buried Obi and Chidi in simple, unmarked graves. No one wanted to buy the backyard. They said the ground felt unnaturally hot to the touch. In time, the compound fell into ruin, but the tree continued to thrive. Children, unaware of the land's dark history, would play near it. They were drawn to the beautiful deep red flowers that bloomed once a year. And sometimes, if you stood close enough to the trunk when the wind blew just right, you wouldn't hear the rustling of leaves. You'd hear something else. A faint whisper, like 2 voices caught in an endless argument. Just one more cut, brother. Just one more cut. This story leaves us with a heavy truth. Greed is a debt that you pay first with your peace, and eventually, with your life. The brothers thought they were harvesting the tree, but all along, the tree was harvesting them. So be careful what you bleed for, because not everything that glitters is gold. Sometimes it's just a trap waiting for a fool to open the door. Thank you for watching. If this story resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe for more tales that explore the shadows of human nature. Until next time, stay safe and stay wise.